Bullets tore the sea into crimson spray, yet history calls it victory. I am your guide from forgotten history tales, and tonight I take you into the chaos of D-Day, where success teetered on collapse. Step closer and witness the secrets revealed. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the sound of surf, gentle, rolling, timeless. The cold waters of the English Channel lash against the steel hull of a landing craft. The spray bites the skin like needles, salt and fear mingling in the air. Then a mechanical clank, a shuddering jolt, and silence. For a heartbeat, there's nothing but the hiss of waves. And then, the ramp drops. The world explodes. Machine guns open fire from the bluffs above, their chatter a demonic symphony. Men stumble forward into waist-deep water, some screaming, others silent, their faces pale under helmets that suddenly feel like paper. Bullets whip the surface, snapping the sea into sprays of death. A man next to me jerks back as if struck by an invisible hammer, his rifle sinking into the surf. The ocean turns red. This is Normandy, June 6th, 1944. And in these first terrible minutes, the entire invasion, the gamble that could end the war, teeters on the edge of catastrophe. I take you back to the hours before dawn. Thousands of ships stretched across the channel, their decks shivering under the weight of men who knew they might not see another sunrise. The air reeked of oil, sweat, and nerves. Officers whispered final instructions. Chaplains clutched small Bibles with trembling fingers. Every man carried not only weapons, but also a small sealed letter to his family. Letters that, for many, would arrive home long before their bodies did. For weeks, they had rehearsed the landings. Maps, models, sand table exercises. They knew every hedge and farmhouse of the French coast, at least in theory. But deep down, they also knew theory rarely survives first contact with reality. The beaches were given code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. They sounded almost playful, like places for summer holidays. Yet behind those names lay concrete bunkers, mines, barbed wire, and men of the Wehrmacht who had sworn to fight to the last. The Allies had promised overwhelming force, air bombardment, naval guns, waves of infantry. But the truth, hidden in the fog of planning, was far more fragile. Weather could undo it. A single lucky German counterattack could unravel it. And the beaches themselves, steep, exposed, unforgiving, were less a gateway to liberation than a killing ground. The men of the first wave stepped into their landing craft in darkness. Engines roared against the tide, while seasickness and dread churned in their stomachs. Some vomited into their helmets, others prayed. The channel itself seemed intent on betrayal. Waves swelled, lashing salt spray into raw faces. The night air was heavy, thick with diesel and human breath. I imagine the silence that fell in those final moments, before the ramp dropped. A silence so absolute that you could hear your own heart pounding like a drum inside your ribcage. And then, with mechanical inevitability, the doors opened onto fire. At Omaha Beach, the plan collapsed almost instantly. Naval bombardments had missed many of the German bunkers. The Air Force had dropped bombs too far inland. The defenders were dug in, untouched, their guns waiting. The first Allied troops were cut down before they could even leave the water. Whole units dissolved in minutes, reduced to scattered survivors clawing for cover behind flimsy obstacles. The tide pulled at them like an enemy of its own, dragging bodies back out to sea. Barbed wire snarled, mines burst beneath boots. Commanders who had dreamed of leading charges found themselves crawling, choking on sand, their men shattered around them. I feel the raw terror of those moments. the paralysis of men pinned against the tide, knowing they had nowhere to go but forward. To stay was death, to move was death, and yet somehow, through chaos and instinct, they moved. What many don't realize is how close it all came to collapsing. Reports filtered back to the high command. Heavy losses. No progress. Some generals whispered the unthinkable. Withdrawal. Imagine the shame, the strategic disaster, if the largest amphibious invasion in history had faltered on its very first step. On the beaches, individual courage became the thin thread holding the invasion together. Small groups of men, often leaderless, began to crawl forward. Engineers blasted gaps in the wire with satchel charges. Medics, knee-deep in surf, dragged the wounded from waves that seemed eager to claim them. Slowly, inch by bloody inch, the tide of men began to rise against the fortified cliffs. But in those first hours, the balance was razor-thin. One more machine gun nest left unbroken. One more counterattack from German reserves. One stronger tide sweeping away the landing craft. Any of these could have tipped D-Day into disaster. As I stand with you, in imagination, among those soldiers gasping for breath behind shattered obstacles, I can feel the weight of inevitability pressing down. The invasion could succeed, or it could fail right here, right now, in the surf at Omaha. History tells us what happened, but in this moment, on this beach, the outcome is anything but certain. And so, the question hangs heavy in the smoke-filled air. How did they turn the impossible into survival, and survival into victory? To be continued in Section 2. The sand sticks to my lips, gritty and bitter, as if the beach itself wants to choke me. I press my body into the ground, waves sucking at my boots, bullets cracking overhead in vicious, invisible lines. Every breath is a theft from death. Around me, men lie still, their helmets half submerged, their faces slack and gray. Some groan softly, others make no sound at all. The sea keeps claiming them, dragging them back as though unwilling to let the living escape. I remember the orders that had seemed so precise on the decks of the transports: advance, regroup, push inland. But here, there is no advance. Here, there is only survival. The raw animal instinct to keep low, to cling to any scrap of cover, to make oneself smaller than fear. And yet, in this wasteland of noise and steel, something begins to stir. A stubborn refusal, fragile at first, but growing stronger with every heartbeat that refuses to stop. I watch as an engineer drags himself forward, sand spitting into his face as another burst rakes the beach. He carries a satchel charge pressed to his chest, cradled like some lethal child. Crawling inch by inch, he presses himself against the barbed wire, lights the fuse with trembling fingers, and then turns his face into the sand. The blast tears the silence, ripping open a gap barely wide enough for a man to crawl through. The air reeks of smoke, burnt metal, and something else. Something human, sharp and unmistakable. But through that hole, men begin to move. One follows another, not with the discipline of drill, but with the desperation of drowning men clawing for air. I crawl with them. Each foot forward feels stolen, each moment a defiance of the odds. The Germans fire relentlessly, their voices shouting orders in harsh staccato, echoing off the concrete bunkers. I can almost feel their eyes on us, picking out movement, hunting for the slightest silhouette against the sand. Yet they cannot kill all of us. For every man who falls, another takes his place, driven not by heroism, but by the terrible truth that staying put is death. The cliffs above loom like dark guardians, pocked with gunfire and smoke. It seems impossible to reach them, let alone scale them. And still, men try. They clutch at shingle, at tufts of grass, at anything that will hold weight. They drag themselves over wire, through mines, through fire. One man slips, sliding back down, only to rise again, face bloodied, but eyes burning with something I cannot name. Perhaps rage, perhaps duty, perhaps only the refusal to die in the surf like an animal. Behind us, the sea is chaos. Landing craft still churn toward the shore, some riddled with holes, others already burning. I hear the shouts of officers, faint against the roar of guns and waves, urging men forward, though they know forward is hell itself. Medics dash between bodies, dragging the wounded into shallow pits dug by mortars, hands slick with blood that will not wash off. The tide, uncaring, swells higher, erasing footprints, swallowing weapons, reclaiming the dead. And yet, amidst the madness, I feel a shift. It is not victory. It is not even hope. It is simply movement. Where before there was paralysis, now there is motion. Small groups huddle behind wrecked vehicles, shattered obstacles, anything that offers a shadow of cover. Leaders are gone, plans are gone, but instinct remains. A corporal with half his squad gone waves survivors forward. A lieutenant, his voice hoarse from screaming, rallies men who do not belong to him. They do not wait for orders. They make their own. I realize then that the invasion is no longer the grand design of generals. It is in the hands of scattered men with sand in their mouths and death at their backs. It is in the choices of the wounded who still crawl, in the madness of those who charge bunkers with grenades clutched to their chests. The battle has fractured into countless tiny wars, each fought by men who believe, perhaps blindly, that if they move one step further, someone else will follow. I see a machine gun nest fall silent after a storm of grenades. I see another engineer carve a path through a minefield with nothing but a bayonet and luck. I see men dragging themselves up the bluffs, clawing at earth that crumbles beneath their fingers. And as they rise, so too does something within me, the faint, trembling sense that maybe, just maybe, the beach will not be our grave. But it is fragile, so fragile. At any moment, the Germans could counterattack, sweeping us back into the sea. Their artillery still hammers the shore. Their bunkers still spit fire. And behind those cliffs lies the real test, the villages, the hedgerows, the roads that must be taken if this invasion is to mean anything at all. The crawling advance is only the beginning. Each yard gained here must be held against the fury of men who know this land as their own. And even as we claw forward, I feel the weight of the next battle pressing in, the struggle not just to survive the beach, but to break through into the heart of France. As the smoke thickens and the cries of the dying mingle with the relentless thunder of guns, one thought coils in my mind, dark and inescapable. If this is only the first step, what horrors wait beyond the bluffs? The air is thicker now, choked with cordite, smoke, and the metallic taste of blood. I drag myself further inland, my elbows sinking into the damp soil at the foot of the cliffs. Above me, the German strongpoints stare down like the eyes of stone gods, unyielding, merciless, pouring fire into the broken ranks below. The sea behind us is no refuge anymore. It is a grave, restless and hungry, swallowing the bodies that drift back with the tide. Forward is the only way left. The cliffs are steep, scarred with earth torn loose by shells, scattered with rock and grass. They should be unclimbable under fire, and yet men begin to rise against them, hauling ropes, clawing with bare hands, clutching bayonets like climbing picks. Every step is a dare to death. A single burst from above can snuff out a life mid-ascent, sending a body tumbling back into the surf with sickening finality. Still, they climb. Still, they move upward, driven not by orders, but by something older, deeper, survival welded to the faint, trembling idea of victory. I press my cheek to the dirt, feeling it vibrate with the shock of shells pounding nearby. My fingers dig in, knuckles white, as though I might anchor myself against the roar of the world collapsing around me. Then I lift my head, just enough to glimpse a soldier above me, his face streaked with mud and sweat, his helmet hanging loose on his head. He climbs as if the cliff itself is his enemy, and when he reaches the top, he throws himself over it with the ferocity of a man who knows there is no retreat. The gunfire does not stop. The bunkers still rage, their barrels spitting death into the beach. But here, above the sand, a new kind of war begins. It is no longer lines of men advancing under flags, but shadows slipping through hedges, grenades arcing into nests, bayonets flashing in brief, brutal encounters. The fight becomes intimate, face to face, hand to hand, man to man. I crawl up after them, the earth tearing at my nails, the sound of bullets whispering past my ears. At the crest, the landscape opens before me, a patchwork of trenches, concrete, and barbed wire, all stitched into the land with ruthless precision. The Germans knew this ground, had measured it, fortified it, turned it into a labyrinth of death. Every trench is a trap, every bunker a fortress. The first clash is savage. Grenades thunder, shrapnel slicing through air that already reeks of smoke. A German soldier rises from behind sandbags, his rifle barking in short, vicious bursts. He is young, barely older than the boys scrambling up the slope. His eyes are wide, frantic, yet steady enough to cut men down. Then a grenade finds his position, and he vanishes in a storm of dirt and fire. There is no time to breathe. Another bunker looms, its gun cutting arcs across the sand below. A squad creeps toward it, huddling low, their bodies pressed to the earth as though trying to merge with it. One man charges with a flamethrower strapped to his back, a grotesque machine that hisses and spits liquid fire. The flame roars into the slit of the bunker, and for a moment the screams rise louder than the gunfire. Then silence, then smoke. I feel the earth tremble with every detonation, the air split by shrieks of the dying. Yet within the chaos, I sense momentum shifting. Small victories accumulate, one nest silenced, one trench overrun, one patch of earth claimed. The battle is still fragile, still on the edge of collapse, but each step inland feels like a defiance of inevitability. Still, the price is unbearable. The ground is littered with bodies, Allied and German alike, their blood indistinguishable, their faces twisted in the same mask of shock. Medics move from one to the next, their hands stained, their eyes hollow. The wounded beg for water, for mothers, for anything to ease the agony. Some do not beg at all. Beyond the bunkers lie the fields of Normandy, but they are no open plain. The countryside is a maze of hedgerows, walls of earth and tangled brush, centuries old, each one a perfect ambush point. Even if the cliffs are taken, the land itself conspires against us. The Germans know this. They retreat not in panic, but in calculation, drawing us into a deeper, slower war where every hedge conceals a rifle, every farmhouse a fortress. As I look back toward the beach, I see the smoke rising in columns, hear the cries still echoing across the surf. It is no longer a landing, no longer an invasion in theory. It is survival, minute by minute, yard by yard. And still the question gnaws. Will these footholds be enough? Will the Allies' scattered fragments of men be able to bind themselves into an army capable of breaking through? Or will the Germans rally, their reserves sweeping down from inland to crush this fragile bridgehead before it can harden into liberation? The air is heavy with the weight of possibilities. Victory, defeat, or a stalemate soaked in blood. As night creeps closer and the guns continue to roar, I feel the unease settle into my bones. For even as the cliffs are won, the battle beyond them promises to be darker still. And somewhere, out there in the hedgerows and villages, the enemy waits with sharpened steel and steady aim, ready to turn Normandy into a graveyard of hope. The cliffs are behind us now, though I can still feel their shadow heavy on my back. The sand, the surf, the thunder of bunkers. Those horrors blur into a memory already half unreal. Yet the ground beneath my boots reminds me the war has not lessened. It has only changed shape. Ahead stretches Normandy, not as the wide-open farmland our planners imagined, but as a suffocating maze. Hedgerows, centuries old, their earthen banks thick with roots and brambles, walls of green that rise higher than a man's head. I step into this labyrinth, and the air changes. The roar of the sea fades into a muffled silence, broken by the distant thump of artillery and the sharp crack of rifles hidden in the foliage. The hedgerows feel alive, as if the land itself conspires against us, turning every advance into a blind crawl. We cannot see more than a few yards ahead. Every path feels like a trap. Every shadow hides a rifle barrel. The men move cautiously, their breaths shallow, rifles raised, boots crunching softly in the mud of narrow lanes. A village church steeple rises far in the distance, but between us and it lie countless walls of earth and brush. The Germans know this ground intimately. They have measured it, mapped it, rehearsed it. For us, it is a puzzle written in blood. The first shots come from nowhere. A burst rips through the leaves, striking down 2 men in the point squad. Shouts erupt, "Cover! Cover!" as soldiers dive into ditches, pressing themselves against the damp soil. I taste the fear again, bitter on my tongue, the same as on the beach, but sharper now because the enemy is invisible. We fire back blindly into green shadows, muzzle flashes strobing against the foliage. The Germans fall silent, then strike again from a different hedge. They are ghosts in their own land. Grenades arc into the hedges, tearing gaps in, the brush showering us with dirt and leaves. We charge through the smoke, bayonets fixed, rifles barking. On the other side, the enemy is already gone, melting into the next hedge line. The pattern repeats. Ambush, retreat, ambush again. Each hedge becomes a fortress, each field a killing ground. I feel the exhaustion creeping in, heavier than the pack on my back. Every advance is measured in feet, not miles. Every casualty feels sharper now, because each man is needed desperately to push forward through this endless green. The medics drag the wounded back to improvised aid stations, barns filled with the groans of men and the stench of blood. There is no glamour here, no sweeping victory, only attrition, grinding, merciless. At night, the fields are restless with movement. Flares streak across the sky, casting the hedges in ghostly white. Shadows crawl, weapons clatter, and the occasional scream pierces the dark. Sleep is shallow, stolen in fragments. Every rustle of leaves jolts the heart, every distant crack of a twig feels like the prelude to death. The German counterattacks come like storms, sudden, violent, then gone. Armored vehicles growl down narrow lanes, their tracks chewing the earth, their guns shredding the hedges into splinters. Infantry surge behind them, hurling grenades, shouting guttural cries that rattle the bones. Our bazookas and Piats spit fire in return, their blasts lighting up the night like brief suns. Tanks burn, hedges blaze, the air fills with the screams of the trapped. And when the smoke clears, the survivors stumble back into the maze, each side bloodied, neither willing to yield. I realize then that the real war is not on the beaches, nor even in the bunkers. It is here, in these claustrophobic fields, where men fight like cornered animals, unseen, unheard beyond the next hedge. Liberation, the word that glowed so brightly in speeches, feels distant now. What exists instead is mud and fear, and the simple need to keep moving, because to stop is to die. And yet, in the quiet moments between firefights, I see something else flicker in the men's eyes. Determination, stubborn and grim. They have endured the surf, the sand, the climb, and now this. Each step forward, though small, is carved in sacrifice. Each field wrested from German hands becomes more than ground. It becomes proof that the tide cannot be pushed back. Still, the cost gnaws at me. Whole platoons vanish in the hedges. Officers fall, their maps stained with blood. Radios crackle with fragments of orders, half lost in static. Confusion reigns, but movement persists. Somewhere inland, bridges must be taken. Roads must be seized. The Germans must be broken. And so we fight forward, hedge by hedge, trench by trench, village by village. As the sun sinks one evening, its light bleeding across the horizon, I stand among the tangled roots of yet another conquered hedge. The smoke of battle hangs low, clinging to the earth, stinging the eyes. The silence feels unnatural, too brief, too heavy. Somewhere in the darkness, the enemy is regrouping, sharpening their knives for the next strike. And I cannot shake the question whispering through the dusk. If the land itself has turned against us, how long before we are swallowed whole by the labyrinth of Normandy? The hedgerows thin, and beyond them lie the villages, clusters of stone cottages, church steeples, narrow lanes that twist and funnel like veins through the land. From a distance they might look quaint, even serene, as if untouched by the chaos. But as we push forward, I see the truth. These villages are fortresses. The Germans have turned every house into a bunker, every window into a rifle slit, every cellar into a tomb waiting for its victims. I step cautiously into the outskirts of one such place. The smell of smoke is everywhere, mingling with manure and the faint, sour reek of death. Windows hang shattered, doors blasted open, and walls are pocked with bullet holes like diseased skin. It feels as though the village itself resents our presence, whispering through broken shutters that we do not belong. The first shots come before we even clear the street. A machine gun stutters from an upper floor, cutting down 2 men instantly. Shouts echo, "Take cover!" and the squad scatters into doorways, ducking behind walls as plaster rains down. I press myself flat against the stone, the vibration of bullets thudding through centuries-old masonry rattling my bones. The air fills with dust and splinters. To move forward, house by house must be cleared. It is slow, brutal work. We kick down doors with boots and rifle butts, grenades tossed into darkened rooms before stepping inside. The blasts echo like thunder in confined spaces, the shockwave leaving ears ringing. The smell of cordite mingles with scorched wood. Sometimes there are Germans inside, crouched in corners, waiting. The firefights are savage, at distances so close I can see the whites of their eyes. Sometimes there is only silence, and the bodies of those who tried to resist. I push up a stairwell with 3 others, each step groaning under our weight. A German soldier bursts from a doorway at the landing, his rifle raised. Time slows. My finger squeezes the trigger, the recoil jerking my shoulder, the muzzle flash blinding for a heartbeat. He crumples, his helmet clattering down the steps. I feel nothing in that moment, not triumph, not relief, only the cold necessity of survival. Outside, tanks grind into the streets, their guns booming, shells tearing open walls like paper. Entire facades collapse, roofs caving in, the sky filled with choking clouds of dust. Civilians, those who have not fled, cower in cellars, clutching children, praying the storm will pass over them. Their homes become battlegrounds, their lives collateral in this contest of steel and will. The Germans fight with a ferocity born of desperation. They know each alley, each garden wall. Snipers perch in church towers, their shots picking off officers with merciless precision. Mortars rain down from hidden courtyards. Their discipline is frightening. They fall back from one house only to ambush us from the next, their retreat never disorderly, always calculated. And then come the tanks. Panthers and Mark IVs rumble into the lanes, their dark silhouettes monstrous against the burning sky. The cobblestones tremble beneath their treads, their guns sweeping the streets like reapers' scythes. We scramble for cover, our rifles useless against their armor. Only the bazooka men and Piat crews can answer, and they move like hunted animals, darting from shadow to shadow, shouldering their awkward weapons, praying for a clean shot. I watch as one bazooka team takes position behind a crumbled wall. They wait until the Panther looms close, its turret swinging lazily. Then, they fire. The rocket streaks across the street, slamming into the side of the beast with a roar. For a breathless moment, nothing. Then fire erupts from its hatches, black smoke billowing skyward. The cheers that rise are ragged, short-lived. Another tank grinds forward, and the fight begins again. The village becomes a furnace. Stone walls collapse, fires leap from roof to roof, and the night glows red with embers carried on the wind. The streets are littered with rubble and bodies, indistinguishable in the chaos. I step over a fallen comrade, his face half buried in dust, eyes open and unblinking. There is no time to mourn, only to press on. Each house we take feels like a victory carved in flesh. Each street we hold is drenched in sacrifice. And yet, even as dawn breaks and the smoke thins, I realize how precarious it all remains. For beyond these villages lies more hedgerows, more ambushes, more armored thrusts. The Germans are not broken. They are bending, retreating, waiting for their moment to strike back with everything they still hold. The men around me are gaunt, hollow-eyed, their uniforms blackened with soot, their faces streaked with grime and exhaustion. Yet there is a fire in them still. They have endured the sea, the sand, the cliffs, the hedgerows, and now this inferno of stone. They do not speak of victory. They do not speak at all, except in clipped commands and quiet curses. But their silence is not despair. It is resolve. And yet, I cannot shake the dread that coils in the pit of my stomach. For if this is what it takes to seize a single village, what will it cost to take all of France? And worse still, what if the enemy, regrouping even now, hurls their full strength back upon us before we are ready? The smoke clears just enough to reveal the horizon. Far away, I hear the unmistakable growl of engines, the rumble of armor on the move. The counterattack is coming. The morning air is heavy, thick with the stench of smoke and churned earth. The village we fought to seize lies shattered, its walls broken, its streets littered with twisted steel and shattered lives. For a moment, there is silence, an eerie, deceptive stillness, as if the land itself draws a breath before screaming again. And then I hear it, a low growl, distant at first, then swelling into a rumble that shakes the very ground beneath my boots. Engines. The sound comes from the east, beyond the haze of smoke and the skeletons of barns. At first, only vibrations in the earth. Then, shapes begin to form, dark hulks moving with mechanical inevitability, cutting through the mist. Panzers. The counterattack has begun. Fear prickles along my spine. We are stretched thin, our units scattered, exhausted. Our foothold inland is fragile, a patchwork of villages and hedgerows barely held together by grit and sacrifice. If the Germans break through here, they can drive us back to the sea, tear open the beaches behind us, and unravel everything we bled to win. The thought is unthinkable, yet it looms, as real as the black crosses painted on the advancing armor. Orders ripple through the ranks. Dig in, hold fast. Bazooka teams scramble into ruined houses, their weapons clumsy against the scale of the beasts rolling toward us. Men lay mines in haste, wires snaking through the mud. Tanks of our own grind into position. Shermans lining the narrow lanes, their crews grim and silent, their faces streaked with soot. The village becomes a fortress again, its broken walls repurposed as shields, its rubble as barricades. Then the guns speak. The first German shells crash into the village, tearing roofs from cottages, collapsing walls already weakened by the night before. Dust blinds, the air fills with choking debris, and the ground heaves as if alive. I am thrown to the dirt, my ears ringing, my body trembling with the concussion. Somewhere close, a man screams, a raw, animal sound, and is abruptly silenced by another shell. Through the haze, I see them. Panzers crawling into the streets, their turrets swiveling with calm menace. They fire without pause, their barrels spitting fire, their machine guns raking stone and flesh alike. The very earth seems to recoil from their presence. Our Shermans answer back, their guns booming, their shells slamming into walls, fountains of rubble erupting as they miss or glance off the armor. It is a duel of steel, and we are caught in the middle. I hurl myself into a doorway, pressing against the cold stone as a panther rolls past barely 20 yards away. Its tracks grind, chewing through the cobblestones, its turret sweeping with predatory patience. A bazooka team emerges from the rubble across the street. They kneel, aim, fire. The rocket streaks, trailing smoke, and slams into the tank's side. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then fire blossoms, an orange bloom that bursts from its hatches. The crew scramble out, screaming, only to be cut down by rifle fire. Cheers rise, desperate and ragged, but they are drowned almost instantly by the roar of another tank rounding the corner. The battle becomes chaos. Streets vanish under smoke. Walls collapse into clouds of dust. Men scatter and regroup again. Orders dissolve into instinct. A squad holds a garden wall until a tank shell obliterates it. Another squad counterattacks down an alley, only to vanish under machine gun fire. The village itself seems to writhe, shifting between our hands and theirs with every heartbeat. I run with a handful of others toward the church, its steeple looming above the ruins like a sentinel. Inside, the pews are splintered, the stained glass shattered, colored shards crunching under our boots. We climb the bell tower, rifles ready, and from its heights, we glimpse the true scale of the counterattack. The fields beyond seethe with movement, columns of infantry, more armor pushing forward, artillery flashes pounding the horizon. It is not a skirmish. It is an attempt to annihilate us. Our artillery answers. The sky howls with the passage of shells. The ground convulses as barrages tear into the advancing troops. Yet still they come, relentless, disciplined, their gray uniforms flowing through the hedgerows like a tide of ghosts. The village shakes with each impact, its stones groaning as if mourning their own destruction. Hours stretch into eternity. The line holds, breaks, reforms, holds again. Men fight with a fury that feels beyond human, clawing for every wall, every window, every breath. Flamethrowers roar, Grenades thunder, bayonets flash in close, desperate struggles. The noise is unceasing, a storm of iron and flesh that drowns thought itself. And then, slowly, the tide falters. The Germans begin to pull back, their armor retreating under the weight of artillery, their infantry slipping into the hedgerows. The village, what remains of it, stays in our hands. But victory feels hollow, carved in ruin. The streets are littered with bodies, friend and foe alike. Tanks smolder in the lanes, their twisted hulks still radiating heat. Houses are gutted shells, their walls scarred black with fire. We have held, barely. Yet as I stagger through the rubble, ears ringing, throat raw from smoke, I know this is only one battle in a greater storm. The Germans are not finished. Their strength remains, and they will strike again. And we are bloodied, exhausted, our foothold still fragile. The sky darkens with evening. Fires glow in the ruins, casting long shadows that sway like specters across the stones. The cries of the wounded echo in the night, mingling with the groan of engines and the distant thunder of guns. Liberation feels distant still, a dream glimpsed through smoke. And in the quiet between barrages, one thought claws at me, colder than fear itself. What if they come again tomorrow, stronger, faster, and we cannot hold? The fires from the counterattack still glow when orders come down. Move, link, consolidate. There is no rest, no pause to grieve among the rubble of the villages. The invasion, fragile as glass, depends on uniting the fractured pieces of this great gamble, Omaha with Utah, gold with Juno and sword. Alone, each beachhead is a wound in German territory, bleeding men and materiel. Together, they might just become a fist strong enough to punch inland. I march through the night with a column of weary men, our boots dragging in the mud, the smell of smoke clinging to our uniforms. The faces around me are gaunt, hollow-eyed, their helmets tilted low, shadows hiding the terror that lingers behind exhaustion. Yet still they march, rifles slung over their shoulders, as if motion itself is the only barrier against despair. The countryside spreads before us in uneasy silence. Fields stretch under the moonlight, interrupted by the dark silhouettes of barns and hedgerows. Somewhere ahead, other units push east and west, stumbling through the same terrain, all of us groping toward one another in the dark. Radios crackle with fragments of voices, maps unfold under shivering hands, but nothing feels certain. Every path could be ambush, every farmhouse could conceal a machine gun. At dawn, we stumble into another village, this one not yet claimed by fire. Its houses are intact, shutters closed, doors barred. The silence is uncanny, thicker than the smoke of the previous day's battles. Civilians emerge cautiously, faces pale, eyes darting, children clinging to skirts. Some weep openly, some stare with blank shock, some offer water and bread with trembling hands. Their presence is a reminder of why we are here, yet also a weight, for their safety now rests on our fragile line. We move through cautiously, posting sentries, checking cellars. The enemy is near, always near, even if unseen. Skirmishes erupt at the outskirts, sudden bursts of fire, then silence again. The line is fluid, undefined, men scattered in pockets across the countryside. It feels less like an army than 1,000 fragments, each clinging to survival, each waiting to be bound into something greater. The engineers work without pause, carving new roads through the hedges, laying down bridging planks, clearing mines with bayonets and sweat. Behind them, the great machine of supply begins to move. Convoys of trucks, long lines of jeeps, columns of tanks crawl inland from the beaches, their engines groaning under loads of ammunition, rations, fuel. The beaches themselves, once chaos, now throb with organized frenzy, cranes lifting crates, bulldozers shaping roads, endless rows of tents sprouting like mushrooms on the sand. I walk among these scenes and feel the immensity of it. This is not only a battle, it is an entire world uprooted and transplanted onto hostile soil. Hospitals, kitchens, fuel dumps, communication hubs, all woven together under the constant thread of German steel. Every crate landed, every tent pitched, every road carved is defiance. But it is also vulnerability. If the enemy punches through, all of this will burn. The Germans know this. Their artillery prowls the skies at night. Their shells shrieking into supply depots, setting fuel and rations aflame. Their fighters scream down from the clouds, strafing convoys, scattering men into ditches. Each raid is a reminder that we are intruders, not yet masters, and always, rumors spread of panzer divisions lurking inland, sharpening their blades for the next thrust. We push on regardless, knitting the fragments together. At last, after days of fighting hedgerows and villages, we hear the news. The American forces from Utah and Omaha have linked, their lines touching, their men shaking hands amid the smoke. British and Canadian troops join from Gold, Juno, Sword. The beaches are no longer islands. They are a chain, a shield, a foothold bound in blood. I stand on a rise and look back toward the sea. The horizon is alive with ships, hundreds, thousands, stretching to infinity. Their silhouettes are black against the sky, their decks still bristling with men and machines waiting to be ferried inland. It is a sight both comforting and daunting. The Armada has delivered us, yes, but now the land must swallow us whole, and we must carve a path through its belly to the heart of Europe. Yet beneath the triumph of union lies the truth. This is only the beginning. The Germans are not beaten. They are massing, gathering their strength, ready to hurl their fury back at us. The hedgerows still loom, villages still burn, and the panzer divisions, the very heart of German might, are said to be on the move. As night falls again, I lie in a shallow trench, the stars above blurred by smoke drifting inland. The ground vibrates faintly with the passage of trucks, tanks, boots, the endless stream of men threading themselves into one vast organism. Around me, soldiers whisper, some of home, some of fear, some of nothing at all. The silence between words is heavier than any speech, and in that silence, a question sharpens like a knife. Now that we are bound together, can we withstand the storm that is surely coming? The beaches are bound, the bridgehead secure in name, yet the ground trembles still with the weight of uncertainty. We have not come here to cling to hedgerows and ruins. We came to break out, to drive inland, to shatter the German grip on France. But as June bleeds into July, I realize the truth. The enemy is not yet broken. He waits, coiled like a serpent, his armor and steel concentrated around Caen. Caen, the city that was supposed to fall on the first day. Instead, it has become a fortress, the hinge of German defense in Normandy. To take it is to open the road south toward Paris, toward liberation. To fail is to remain trapped in this cage of fields and hedges, bled dry while the enemy grows stronger. And so the order comes. Attack. Again and again, until the city is ours. I march with the men toward Caen, the summer sun blazing overhead, the dust of convoys rising in choking clouds. The land groans under the weight of machines, Shermans, Churchills, Cromwells, all lined up, like steel beasts waiting to be unleashed. Aircraft thunder overhead, endless waves of bombers darkening the sky. The plan is overwhelming force. Crush Caen under fire, then storm the ruins. But deep down, I know the Germans have planned for this. They have dug deep, their tanks hidden in orchards, their guns concealed in stone barns. They will not give Caen easily. The bombardment begins at dawn. The sky shudders, the earth convulses. Entire districts of the city vanish in plumes of dust and flame. The sound is beyond description, an endless roar that drowns thought, shakes the very marrow of the bones. The air reeks of burning stone, of smoke so thick it clings to the tongue. When at last the guns fall silent, we advance, stumbling through a landscape unrecognizable, a wasteland of rubble and fire. But from that rubble, the Germans rise. Machine guns chatter from hidden nests, snipers crack shots from shattered spires. Their tanks emerge from camouflage, their armor glinting through the smoke. The battle becomes a slaughterhouse. Streets vanish under fire, buildings collapse with men still inside, and every corner hides death. The city itself fights us, its ruins offering cover to defenders who know every street, every alley. I push forward with a squad through a marketplace now reduced to stone and ash. The ground is littered with broken carts, the air with the stink of charred wood and flesh. A German machine gun opens up from the far end, pinning us against a collapsed wall. We return fire, grenades arcing, the blast echoing like thunder in the hollow square. Silence follows, broken only by the crackle of flames. We move again, slower, more cautious, knowing the next corner may be our last. The struggle for Caen drags on, day after day, week after week. Whole units are consumed. Ground gained one day is lost the next. The British and Canadians fight tooth and nail, their armor dueling panthers and tigers in the narrow streets, their infantry grinding forward yard by yard. The Americans push west, locking German divisions in place, bleeding them, forcing them to fight everywhere at once. It is a crucible, and we are all being melted down within it. And then, at last, the dam cracks. The Germans, worn thin by attrition, stretched beyond endurance, begin to falter. Our tanks surge through gaps, our infantry pours into breaches. Caen burns behind us, but the road south lies open. The breakout has begun. I feel the shift as something physical, a weight lifting, a breath long held finally released. The Allies surge into the open country, no longer bound by hedgerows and narrow lanes. Armored columns roll across wide fields, their dust clouds rising like banners. Aircraft swoop low, strafing retreating convoys, bombing bridges, tearing at the German rear. For the first time since the beaches, momentum is ours. Yet the land we cross is scarred, the cost written in every field, every ruin, every grave hastily marked with a helmet and a rifle. The beaches we left behind are now secure, supply pouring in day and night, but they are also cemeteries, their sands consecrated by blood. The villages, the hedgerows, the shattered towns, they remain haunted, echoing with the voices of those who will never march further. I look back in my mind to that first step off the landing craft, the water rising cold around my legs, the bullets stitching the surf, the certainty that the invasion was doomed. I remember the crawling advance, the climb into fire, the maze of hedgerows, the villages of stone and flame, the counterattacks that threatened to sweep us into the sea. And now, standing on the road south, I understand how close it all came to collapse. D-Day was not inevitable victory. It was a knife's edge, balanced on the courage of ordinary men, on chance, on chaos. It almost failed, on the beaches, in the hedgerows, in the ruined streets of Caen. But it did not. And because it did not, the road to Paris lies ahead, and beyond Paris, the end of the Reich. Night falls as we bivouac on ground freshly won. The stars glimmer faintly through the haze, their light dimmed by the smoke of burning towns. Around me, Men settle into the earth, too tired to speak, their silence filled with memories too heavy to voice. The guns rumble still in the distance, but here, for a moment, there is quiet. And in that quiet, I hear the ghosts of Normandy, the whispers of those who fell, the echoes of waves breaking on the beach, the promise that their sacrifice carved this fragile path into history. The war is not over, the storm is not spent, but tonight, in this fragile stillness, I know we have turned the tide.